Very good afternoon, everybody, and good morning and good evening also for viewers from Far East and West from all over the globe. Welcome to the second day of the International Conference on Sustainability Education, ICSE 2021. Today's day is very special, particularly for those who celebrate Ganesha, whose name is considered auspicious to begin any activity. So Ganesh Chaturthi is being celebrated all over India and I think abroad as well. So our greetings to all those devotees and those who are observing the day. And also we have today with us Shri Anil Prakash Joshi ji with us, and who just reminded me that yesterday it was Himalaya Divas, the Himalayas Day. Particularly, this is very important for Himalayan states and Himalayan countries, the whole Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So I think in his address, he will speak about this. Before we begin formally today's session, I would like to take you back to day one, just to recap that. We began yesterday with a grand opening by Shri Pradeep Burman, Chairman, Mobius Foundation. He opened the conference and the exhibition, networking hall, everything, all the resources that you can see on this platform, that was declared open. But one important thing that he said during his address was, of course, in the context of SDGs and climate change, that how youth are taking the lead role. And particularly he mentioned about the extension rebellion, the EXR, popularly known, in how youth are taking lead in making policy changes, making action happen in every area, whether it is climate change, biodiversity, disaster risk reduction, or any of the environmental problems that we see today's world is plagued with. The technical session began with the chief guest, Sri Atul Bagai, Director, United Nations Environment Program. And basically, he was, since UNEP has declared the decade for ecosystem restoration, and day one for this conference was also devoted to ecosystem education for ecosystem restoration. So he called upon the participants to devote to restore ecological integrity of the planet. And also he said this is going to be a decade of action. And particularly he mentioned about two barriers that is basically putting hindrance to the action. One is the nexus between environment and health. Of course, Corona, this pandemic is one of the examples of how this nexus can create havoc worldwide. And the second one was limited knowledge and awareness about these things. And then Terry Spire, who is the founding director of Earth Overshoot, and he was telling that since last 50 years, we have been trying to fix the environmental problems, but nothing has worked and things are getting worse. And that is why he is trying to create awareness to break the whole silence which is there on the action front, and how we can confront it, and openly and honestly we can face these problems with sensitivity and offer alternative vision. Mr. Kartikeya Sarabhai, in his keynote address, he emphasized about talking and working together, and basically to introspect what difference we have made. Particularly, he mentioned about handprint action, the action towards sustainability, and how we can take these to the scale. Parameters like in case of COVID, we say that if 80% is vaccinated, we can open the economic activities. Similarly, he said for the environmental or for the action front, we must also have certain parameters, and we must take to the scale that we have achieved up to 80% or to certain level, then we can say it's a success. So that was the day one, the plenary. Then we had 5 sessions, those parallel sessions, and in fact, uh, I would mention here the young reporters of Environment YRE. Many of you, they have approached and interviewed also. They have prepared a beautiful newsletter, and I would request my colleague if they can project that newsletter, because that sums up all the proceedings of day one. So, Archana, if you can present that. Uh,
Yes, sir. Sir, we can display the newsletter at the end of the plenary, sir.
okay.
Yeah.
So straightway, in fact, yeah, there are some nitty gritty. They are still working some last minutes, and let me first call upon Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi, Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan awardee, founder of Himalayan Environment Studies and Conservation Organization, HESCO, a very long time friend of mine. We have been almost, Anilji, it might be around 30 years now, 3 decades we have. I could see you in a very different avatar, but your trademark, the gamcha is there. And he is a PhD in environmental sciences doctorate, and he established HESCO in 1981, and his work majorly includes developing sustainable technologies that are ecology inclusive, economy for ecosystem development. He has coined a word, gross environmental product, GEP, and that has been accepted. It's a parallel to GDP, and that has been accepted as a growth measure for the state of Uttarakhand. That's very unique. Like Bhutan has gross national product, this national happiness, GNS. I think this is very unique, GEP, and one state has adopted it. Government of India, of course, awarded him the fourth highest civilian honor, Padma Shri, in 2006 for his outstanding contribution to Indian society. He was also awarded Padma Bhushan in 2020 for environmental work in Uttarakhand. Dr. Joshi appeared in Kaun Banega Crorepati, Karamveer episode aired on 25th December 2020. I think many of you must have watched that episode. So, Dr. Joshi, floor is yours.
Thank you, Rambutji. This is a long time after we are meeting. That's a very important day that you have devoted to. It's a climate literacy. And I think this is the high time, despite the fact that we have been discussing environmental deterioration, degradation, and so on. But collectively, we have not been able to be together to explore and work on this thing which you have tried to put among in front of all of us to speak on and suggestions and whatever we have as an experience working together with. Well, I would say, Rambuji and all colleagues that who are there, that please accept my pranam and namaskar. You will know that aware we are all. In fact, everybody knows what is happening locally, regionally, and globally. We are all aware, but we don't act. Unfortunately, we want to beware them, everybody, what is happening, but it never come in our behavior. Unfortunately, it remains the same. what it was in 5 years ago, a decade ago, and despite the fact that we are losing fast our small streams. If we are living close to any pond, that is all lost. And anything which, as a part of a nature and the resources that we have, we are losing fast them. But there is nothing as such, I do not see that if there is an voluntarism, collective voluntarism to save our planet, I do not see. Well, we have been discussing all such issues, and many efforts are all across globe all too. But unfortunately, we have not realized everyone to save this planet and think what is all happening around us. And why I always been thinking as a teacher I was, that what can be the best tool to realize everyone what is now currently happening, and if it continues, we are going to face ire of nature. And recent report of IPCC is more scary and threatening that 20 years from now there will be many things which will be against the human and the life. And honestly speaking, Rambuji, we are from a place which is Himalaya. And the Himalaya, when the IPCC report came, I personally was not surprised with that, because for the last decade, number of things happening in the Himalaya, because we are the most, we are a place which is very vulnerable, very sensitive. A slight change in nature that cause huge damage to us. And that has been happening. Look at the current monsoon also. It is a JNK, Himachal Pradesh, all mountain states had to suffer a lot. Why does it happen? IPCC report earlier had also been there. And everybody, everyone, if you just make a survey and pick up whomsoever you want to talk, whether climate is in a good state and order, you will find an answer from anywhere, anyone, that whether it is doing good or not, you'll find that they say, no, it's not good, it's bad. But suddenly you should ask, how are you going to contribute towards? If every one of us enjoy water, soil, air, and so on, so we will say that they're not unaware. They're aware of it, but when their contribution comes, it never happens to be there. And I sometimes find one of the things which we could not share to in my generation and also this coming generation, we could not make people to know, in fact, the history of Earth. What is this Earth all about? And after the supernova, bang, big bang, and so on, this planet came 4.6 billion years ago. And the way this history of Earth, if we closely see and let people also know, and even, I mean, right from the beginning of our education and our awareness drive, we realize that Earth is called Mother. Why do we call it as a mother? Because it had taken the pain which we normally say the labor pain, worst of it, that how one after the other 3.86 billion years ago, the first life came, and that is called Leuca, last universal common ancestor. We had one common ancestor which began with one cell, and then diversity came, and there are so many fall and rise happened within the earth. And the biggest two of the the two major thing happened with the earth about 25 crore year ago, that we called a great dying, where everything was desiccated and there was no life left. Only hardly 1% survive with that. And the recent one, 6.5 crores year ago, another, this Deccan lava desiccated everything. That does mean that earth by its nature has also been doing it. But what is going to be next through the nature is a different issue. But ultimately, what we are as a human trying to accelerate the things, we do not know, in fact, the pain this earth had taken to give birth to the Homo sapiens. We must be knowing, and whether we do not even know, that first we have habilis, and then the erectus, Homo erectus, habilis came, then erectus came, and ultimately Homo sapiens came. Now look at this Homo sapiens, who has been, unfortunately, ultimate product of the earth, Mother Earth, the pain it took and gave birth to this human. And if you take 4.6 billion year as 46 year, so you'll be, shocked that we as a human had a birth. It is only 4 hours ago we were born. If we take 46 year, 4.6 billion years equivalent to 46 year, we would know that hardly 4 hours ago we took the birth. And whatever damage that we did, it is what within half an hour and within 15 minutes. And what the damage was, the way we as a human Homo sapiens, the intelligent people that Mother Earth gave rise to, because we were above all animals. If you look into the history of the life that came on the earth, you'll find we human came at the last, because Mother Earth had to give us a mind management and other important thing which the other animal did not have. And this Homo sapiens, within a 4 hour it came, and within 15, half an hour, it spoiled everything. And with this Homo sapiens, so don't forget that. What happened 65 crore years ago, 25 years, crore years ago, the whole earth, as I said, the nature, you cannot command a nature. Nature, its own course to do so. What you are going to spoil you only, because the life will come again from the bottom of the sea. Some proton, amino acid, and ultimately leuca kind of things come. But life will again come, and Homo sapiens will not be there. So it is a matter of, in fact, if we really want to, let our coming generation to know that if you will not maintain, you are in a loss rather than the nature. The earth is not at all likely to suffer. It has its own course. If you will not behave well, the life, this will disappear. So I think that has been one part which I normally have been talking when people, that whether they know why the Mother Earth we call it, what happened when the whole story of the birth of the human. But they are unaware, because they do not know, because this generation has come up in a time where they do not know about many things which are very important today from climate, ecological, environmental point of view. Now the thing which, and the reason is the economy, we have always been talking GDP. And where is that GDP? When the corona came, everything was closed down. It has gone to the patal. It could not come again ever since. And that GDP, when it did not have do anything, it is the soil, water, air, you could get a relatively better quality. You survived. The reason is that the human and the man, ultimately the lavish life is the ultimate unfortunate part. We should survive. We should better comfortably live. But the way we want to lead our life, the lavish one is ultimately something which damaging the earth. And that is the reason why, and how one can be made accountable. At both two-pronged strategy, accountability have to be fixed by individual accountability. If you are breathing, if you are eating, you are drinking water, you have something to do on the nature, so you are accountable for your term of principle of nature says consumer must be a contributor. So whether we follow it or not, it has to be raised. Number second is state must be made accountable for that. GDP, everything is GDP, everything is GDP. Anything loss that we have been causing to the nature doesn't come in the GDP. And even that repair of that loss comes into GDP. For example, water quality lost, water quantity loss. We bought a water bottle business. We bought a quality water purifier. Quality of air is stooped down. We bought a air purifier. Now that part go to the GDP, but the loss of nature doesn't come in the GDP. And therefore, we fought here, fought with the state also, that your GDP has nothing to do with all individual of this state. What is more important, we need a water, soil, air, and therefore there has to be one parallel growth measure, and we call it a growth measure. 4 pillars. soil, water, air, and forest. These 4 pillars, we rest our life and everything. Therefore, there has to be a measure, ecological growth measure, and that accountability have to be fixed. We have been involving the many agencies who, I mean, even the court, the government, bureaucrats, politicians trying to lobby, because otherwise there will be a lobby. We are collectively want to realize them, and then I replace that. That can only help us. And ultimately, I would say that in Indian holy books, we say that the Tyago hi sarvasenani hante. That means if you can give up something, you can only save. And at least in the case of the climate issues, if unless until you quit, you give up your luxury, you give up the, I mean, a surplus that you have been trying to enjoy through the other means of technology input and technology ways that you're generating lavish gadgets, this and that, you cannot save the earth. So I'm very grateful that you have invited me, but I would definitely request that we have to make people accountable, and that accountability can only come, which is rightly fixed from individual to the state. And then only I think that will be possible if we realize them. And earth, history, science, knowledge has to be shared with the people so that they realize that how, from where they came. And with that, I thank you very much for inviting me.
Sir, you are mute.
Thank you so much, Anilji. Very inspiring words, true to your inimitable style. I think you inspired all of us. And thank you so much. We will remain in touch with you for more inspiring actions, particularly this series of our ICSE series. So let's move it to Dr. Donna Goodman. She is founder and executive director of Earth Child Institute. She has been the champion of rights and participation of child and youth in the environment sector in over 60 countries for more than 25 years. In fact, she has worked very closely with UN system, UNICEF, UNEP, WHO, and others. In fact, in the private sector also, she served as global program director for Swarovski Water School, as well as Turner Broadcasting for Cartoon Network, MTV through production of a documentary special program about water featuring JZ, and Netflix documentary entitled Water School. Donna also appeared in 2019 this ICSC, and last year also in one of the ICSC forums. She has been a great supporter of ICSC, and all of us, we work very closely. In fact, we are bringing together one of the publications which generated out of ICSC, and under publication with the Cambridge Scholars. She has contributed a very scholarly article to that. So I request Donna to take the floor. Donna Goodman. Are you on mute, Donna?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. This is a problem with technology sometimes. We all do that.
I know. Well, it's so good to see you again, and thank you for all your kind words, Dr. Ram, and Dr. Joshi for your comments, which I couldn't agree more. And I'll get back to the Uttarakhand connection in just a minute. And thank you to everyone else who's here. And I heard just the slight end of yesterday, but it sounds like we're all on the same page. The recap from yesterday, and really what I like to speak to in all of this is from the perspective of children and young people. So the roughly third of all people on Earth that are under the age of 18. And it just strikes me, when I worked for UNICEF, I was working in water, environment, and sanitation. It was about 2005 when we first started noticing that the climate change was really happening and serving as a strong driver to forced mitigation of farmers into cities and conflicts over water and natural resources, and started on behalf of UNICEF to work on climate change issues related to children in 2007 at the COP in Bali. So now here we are 15 years later, when some of the kids that were born at that time, were just being born at that time. They're 15 today. And we as adults, we've been talking about these very things. We're colleagues and we know one another, and we are chanting to the choir so often because we know that the IPCC reports are scary. And most of us know that these things were going to happen more than 10 years ago, that the train has left the station. But what I prefer to talk about is the capacity of these kids to really turn things around in a way that our generation wasn't able to. And one of the things that has been striking me in all of the years working with government ministries, with climate change adaptation funds, with education money within UNICEF, a small percentage of it goes to climate change. And that, if at all, actually in most countries, there's none, because let's say climate change adaptation reaches a country and it goes into the finance ministry. Then they work with the environment ministry to dole that out, sometimes health, as was mentioned, but very, very rarely does the education ministry come to the table, or non-formal education, NGOs, faith-based organizations, and so forth. And I feel that now that we are at this point in development where last night I looked up the definitions of climate literacy, because that's what we were focusing on in this session. But climate literacy, all the definitions that I found really revolve around knowing the science, understanding the way that the planet works and what's going on. And that's really like a big nut for a first grader, a second grader, a third grader, even an adult, to wrap their head around without getting really scared and thinking, oh, what I hear mostly from people here in the US is, what can we do? What can I do as one person? But the fact is that what every one of us does works together to start to make a change. And although some of these effects of mitigation are already happening, there are things that we can do now that changes the way that we live, the way that we live in harmony with nature, the way we live in harmony with one another, and move things forward that way, so that what feels like a very fearful, insurmountable blockage to human development can turn into a completely new wave and way of life on Earth. And so that's really what I have been proposing. I have, as Dr. Ram mentioned, I've worked in a lot of countries, mostly for UNICEF, but also in the private sector. And I know that we can go to 100 children here, 1,000 children there, 1,000 schools even. I worked in Nepal in 1,000 schools. And you can make a difference that way. Sure, we've been doing it. Many of us have been doing it for decades now. But what I have personally chosen to do moving forward is looking at mass media and I'm writing books of fiction because what children have told me all around the world is, one of the things they tell me is that they want to know, what are the kids like in India? What are they like in America? What are they like in Brazil? What are they like in China? How do they do things? So my career since then has been about raising awareness to children around the world. Although climate change, the scary global picture can also be brought down to a very smallest common denominator, which is our own communities. Where does our water come from? Where does it go? When it floods, what do we do? How are we gonna drink? How are we gonna dispose of our waste? These things, we started out thinking of them in the least developed countries, when I came to the UN in 1998. But now these are things that we all need to know. And so what I've chosen to do is to go with fiction and hopefully into multimedia, which is why we did the Netflix documentary and some of the other things, because reaching just 100 or 1,000, even 10,000 children at one time isn't enough anymore. And I believe that these kids are more highly evolved than we were. And my granddaughter is 7 years old, and she goes to a warrior ninja class, and she climbs over mountains, and she can, swing across a zip line, things like that. These kids do that. And so in my book, The Eco Masters, the first one includes children, girls, they're all girls for gender equity reasons as well. And they start in New York to Malawi, Laos, and India, in Rishikesh, actually, in Uttarakhand, which is where I wanted to get back to that. And they have to get to this hidden training center in the Amazon region, river basin in Brazil. And that has gone along very well. And now I'm finishing up the second book, which is really very India-centric, because it is told in the voice of the girl, our Eco Masters character, Angari, who lives in Rishikesh. And the book starts with the girls are taken in like a plasma drop and end up at the top of Mount Everest, whose name is Chomolungma in Tibetan. And they talk about the history of the indigenous, and she goes back to her home in Rishikesh, and the glaciers had been melting and the river is flooding. And so these kids are really like working together, learning about each other, and finding ways of solutions together with nature. So Chomolungma tells her that they have 7 sisters. So I'm going in a fiction way that's very much based in science, is what I would say. And so it's not to scare kids, but to help them to learn from and with each other, and to appreciate nature as a being, as a living being, as well as one another. And so that's the direction that I'm taking now. I wouldn't call it is climate literacy, absolutely, but it's not, like a science class about learning about the science of greenhouse gases. For me, I think that belongs in university level and up, and also teaching in school, but that's not the way that any of us are really going to change life on Earth, especially in this period now that the storms are coming. I live in the US, so just last week there was a big storm, Ida, and it wasn't the strongest hurricane in the world, but the Gulf of Mexico was 3 degrees warmer than it has ever been before. And that's why it got so strong by the time it got to Louisiana, because the Gulf of Mexico just gave all the power to that storm. So we know, a lot of us know the science, but the fact that the Gulf of Mexico is 3 degrees warmer, we're not going to change that by knowing the science overnight. but we can help things by people knowing their evacuation plans, what to do, how to get fresh water, what to do, what to have on hand, and so forth. When I went to my very first climate change conference in Bali in 2007, there was a boy there. It was the first time we had children in climate change. And he said to me, you know, my colleagues, my friends and I will survive here. You know, we don't have a problem, but your kids won't. And so I sort of knew, but I asked him, why do you think that is? And what he told me was like, I know what to eat in the forest. I know where to get water to drink. I know what to do with my waste. I know where it's safe to sleep. And these kinds of things are not things that we teach generally. You know, we teach standards to tests, to science and so forth. And I'm all for that, but I think right now, like, Rome is burning a little bit literally. And yeah, so my approach is really to get kids involved. And you know, there are kids who are global spokesperson. I call them like almost professional kids. But out of the 2.2 billion kids, the ones that you hear or you see on the streets, they're probably 2% of all kids, 1 or 2%. But every single one, all these kids have the ability to bring change. So that's really my piece. And I thank you for inviting me to share. And happy to be here. You see, it's still dark here this morning. So thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much, Donna. In fact, for taking the trouble. It's, I think, early morning in your part. You took trouble, and I think it's a very inspiring speech. Thank you so much. Now we would like to invite Dr. Vibha Dhawan. She is Director General of the TERI, which is the Energy and Resources Institute. And she is with the Institute since 1985 for a very long period. She has also served as the Vice Chancellor of TERI School of Advanced Studies. And she is actively involved in research as well as policy development, both at the national and international level. She is a task force member of a number of committees and departments of Government of India, and currently serving as adjunct professor at Consul General South Asia Partnership, Michigan State University. So over to you, Dr. Vibhaji. We would like to hear from you.
Thank you so much for your very kind words, and kindly accept my congratulations for organizing such a conference on such a wonderful theme. It's when we talk of education for ecosystem restoration, I think we are talking about everything what is happening on this planet today. When we look at what is happening in New York, floods never heard of, Amazon forest fires, floods in Germany. Few reports are, I should say, they are out of proportion, but many reports, I'll say that we are still not reporting what is actually happening. It is, as it's rightly said, that children, they are our future, but not just they are our future. I think we also have to give them the skill set to shape their future themselves. Because what we have done in the past few years, maybe out of ignorance, that we have overused our resources. If we go back, what Mahatma Gandhi said, that this earth has everything for the needs, but not for the greed. And on the name of, I should say, that the society is developing, the society unfortunately took the path of consuming more rather than conserving more. We followed the wrong path. And somewhere when I say that it was also out of ignorance, that maybe it's about 2 decades or 3 decades back when people started talking about climate change, And Terry, I should say, was one of the earlier voices which started talking about climate change. So at that stage, I'll say even I never thought what is happening today is actually going to happen. And I remember my continuous discussions with our then Director General, Dr. Pachori, and I'll tell him, I think we should concentrate more on the problems we are facing today. Like we need more food. But so we neglected because we felt as if that is something which is not going to happen. But today it is happening. And when I say that students or young children, young minds, they are going to show us the path. We have seen their power in the past, like when it was say no to crackers, the entire movement was taken by the children. So it was they, and believe me, they were telling their parents, why are you doing it? Say no to plastic. It again, whatever little we have achieved is largely because of the movement by young children. So it is extremely important to educate young minds and tell them what we are doing is right and what we are doing is not that right. And we also have to tell them, because many a times what we try to do is that we try to convince ourselves of our wrong deeds by saying world is not static, and in the changing environment this is the only way to live. But we have to believe that you can have comfort, you can have sustainability, you can have development, but following sustainable principles. They do exist. Even today, we have methods that we can do much better than what we are doing today. Realizing this, Terry, we started with a dedicated environment education and awareness group in Terry, and which strives towards addressing a need for education for sustainable development through academic institutions and society at large. I am happy that Terry is part of this international sustainability education conference being attended by global experts and practitioners from the field of education for sustainable development. This is a platform to discuss innovative ideas, case studies that revolve around making environment education an experience of joyful learning and constructive action. As I said, we do have the technologies. It has been introduced to some extent, depending on the state. It has been introduced in school curricula as well. But then one of the major problems is, are educators well aware of these options as well as the impact of continuing business as usual? They also need to understand how do they communicate to their children. That is going to determine success of this entire program. If we talk in terms of time, we are talking of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal, which is just 9 years away. And role of education has become critical in achieving sustainability and solving pressing global ecological issues, including biodiversity and climate change. What happened? The loss of biodiversity in Amazon forest, I think, will not get repaired, at least in your and my lifetime. We don't know whether we will have the same animals, same microflora, macroflora available with us in years to come, and how many species, what kind of loss we have experienced in the recent past. My hope is that this conference will pave a way for sharing learnings and experiences from across the spectrum, bringing forth actionable insights for bringing much needed transformation in education for sustainable future. ESC is concerned with empowering educators with equipped knowledge, skills, values, and attitude to take informed decisions and make responsible actions for environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society. A sustainable society requires healthy, well-educated, skilled, and active citizens that are informed and motivated to live with sustainability and ensure future generations' quality of life. Over here, I'd like to share one of the initiatives of Department of Biotechnology. They called it DNA Club, and it was implemented in the northeastern region of India, which is very, very rich in biodiversity. And that area, unfortunately, it's also that you do have rural parts which of course, in last 10 years or so, it is still that through media, they know what is happening in other parts of the world. But otherwise, they were comparatively, I should say, untouched kind of virgin areas. Now, over there, the students, there was an attempt made to sensitize that what rich resources they have, the biodiversity they have, how to conserve that bioresource that they have inherited, and how that can be used in a proper way, so that they make money from that bioresource, and at the same time they learn how to conserve it. So that is why we call it DNA. It was Department of Biotechnology Natural Resources Awareness Program. And I was so happy being involved with that program that those young children, school children, I'm sure for all their life, they are never ever going to damage any of the natural resource, and they are going to value what they have inherited in the best possible way. So there, I personally feel that educating and training students for sustainable decision making in future is a great transforming learning which should be encouraged. COVID has also taught us another thing. I should say it has, of course, it has been bad for the humanity, but let's look into what it has taught us. The first lesson is that whatever happens in one part of the globe, it's not going to take very long for it to spread around the world. And everyone will get infected in some way or the other because of the disease. The other most important thing it has, I should say, especially sitting in Delhi, it has taught us what a clean environment means. Delhiites have perhaps forgotten to see the blue sky, the unpolluted air, the kind of air they can breathe. But during pollution time, during COVID time, due to the lockdown, we actually have experienced, or I should say our children and grandchildren has experienced for the first time that kind of clear sky and clean air to breathe. So therefore, now they have a dream. This is what we would actually want. We all were still existing, we were living, but at the same time, this is what we want. The other thing is sort of what sustainability means. What are your needs? I'll say most of us haven't shopped for last 1.5 years, except the essential, which are largely ordered online. So our needs are very little. We have wardrobes and wardrobes full of clothes. Do we really need them? The way we eat, I don't think so we need that much of food. The way we waste things, like if you look at the kind of amount of food which is wasted, which is brought from the supermarket and then it expires at our home and then we put it in the bin. So those things which we have forgotten, that our needs are very little. Rest all is luxury. That is being taught to us by COVID. The other thing is that we are talking of equality all the time. Equality in education. Government of India, many states, they have taken steps. And that was that even in the private schools, 25% of the students should be from economically weaker section. Very good initiative. But see how those kids suffered during the COVID time. We are talking of online classes, but they missed on online classes because they had no resources. They had no telephone or no phone to attend online, no internet, nothing. So therefore, they are going to lag behind. When we are talking of sustainable development goals, COVID has taken us many years back. And it also taught us that there are few things that we should be more careful when we are talking of equality, and we need to create that kind of infrastructure as well. While we are still talking of people not getting educated, numbers are quite large or varying from state to state within the country. They are also in Africa and so on. But it has also put pressure on higher education. So that is again something to be seen. But like right now, I won't touch upon that point because we are talking of the importance of educating children, especially children, about the sustainable development goals and sustainability as a whole. I'd like to mention another thing, and that is, and because I always look back to think ahead. And Terry, way back in 1997, had launched a study what we call Green India 2047. Now, that particular study was based on that if we continue on the same path, business as usual, what the scenario is going to be in 2047 in India when India will complete 100 years of its independence. Thereafter, because it's not that you only scare people, you also have to come out with solutions. So we brought out another study, which was Disha, and that was basically Disha means way forward. So then it was that what can be done in businesses. We are not living in a static world. The only thing which is constant in this world is change. So basically, the technologies, or rather, we are developing technologies which we haven't thought of even 10, 20 years back. The way, because if you remember discussions about 15 years back, they were all on what is going to happen when we will be left with no petrol. But the way technologies are developing today, maybe we won't even extract the entire petrol because we will soon be moving to either electric cars, electric mobility, or maybe even hydrogen, who knows, because the way it is developing. So therefore, our research efforts, they are on a constant change what you should be doing. Again, I would like to say the thing which is constant is education engraved in the brains of young children, sustainability. If we look back, because see, we are a generation who had seen tough times, our parents have seen tough times, and we therefore experience sustainability at home. There was no concept of use and throw. It was everything was used till the time what we talk of circular economy today was actually practiced at our houses all the time. We have forgotten that tradition on the name of affordability. We can afford it, why should we do it? It doesn't look nice. We have to bring that back into our daily life. We have to teach our children and we have to practice that ourselves. So thank you very much and congratulations once again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vibha, for your kind words and also very inspiring examples and what Terry has been doing. We are really thankful to you. In fact, Terry has been with us since the inception of ICSC in 2019. They were kind enough to host the event rather in the India Habitat Center. So we look forward to more cooperation in this area. So we are lucky to have now uh, I think he needs no introduction. Dr. Rajendra Singh, waterman of India. Uh, he is, you all know that he has won the Magsaysay Award, Raman Magsaysay Award, and Stockholm Water Prize In fact, he is member of so many initiatives related to water, the kind of movement that has started in India and abroad. He also appeared in Karoorveer special of Kaun Banega Karodpati in 2018. Rajendra Bhai, we are very, very late now, and we request you to kindly say in a very brief the message to this forum. You were kind enough to grace the first ICSE in 2019, and we are really grateful to have you here. So over to you.
Okay. Really, now is the right time when we can discuss about the future of our pupil. Now, if we can think this nature healthy, we are healthy. So what we can do for healthy nature and now if we think about the healthy nature, so we can think about the common future. And when we are thinking about the common future, so we need a education system when we हमें एक ऐसा शिक्षा का तंत्र चाहिए जो हमें प्रकृति और मानवता के अनुकूल जीना सिखा सके और उसके लिए हमारी प्रकृति, धरती, पानी और पर्यावरण से जुड़े हुए सब सवाल हैं। अभी हम बहन जी को सुन रहे थे, उन्होंने काफी इन चीजों पे प्रकाश डाला। समय थोड़ा कम है, मैं भी बस इतना ही कहना चाहता हूं कि हम सब साथ हैं और मिलकर प्रकृति और पानी और पर्यावरण के काम में एक दूसरे की साथ जुड़कर आगे इस काम को बढ़ाएं। आज रामबख्श जी इतना ही। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सो मच। आपका आशीर्वचन बहुत है इतना, और हम लगता है आप ट्रेवल कर रहे हैं कहीं, इसलिए फिर भी आपने समय निकाला और हम सबको गौरवान्वित किया। आपसे संपर्क में रहेंगे और आपका आशीर्वाद लेते रहेंगे। So friends, it was Dr. Rajendra Singh, and he spoke about the working together, nature, water, environment, the affinity that we all have. So I think we are extremely delayed for the next session. So we straightway we are going to move into parallel sessions, and I would request, I again thank you all, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Dona, Rajendra Singh, Anil ji, and all the audience who has graced this occasion. And let us all move to respective breakaway sessions. Thank you very much.